That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The Rockwell timepiece says it's time. So come on in. Stay a while. It's time to get coached up with another edition of the Coach Scott Field Show. That's right. I'm a proud ambassador of Rockwell brand. So go to rockwelltime.com. This month, they have outstanding discounts on anything you see there on the website. So go surf around a little bit. Check out the beautiful timepieces. Check out the merch. Check out all the swag. It is outstanding. Like and follow the Coach Scott Field Show on Facebook. Smash that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, my man Pete and I say turn that knob up. We're about to put that flavor in your ear. Watch us on DBTV Monday through Friday and check local listings for that, where we have the opportunity to be seen in over 300 million households around the globe. Check us out on CSTV Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Check us out on the Rewind Sports 60. We appreciate your continued support. So without further ado, my man Pete, welcome to the show, my friend. It's a pleasure to have you on. I am a huge basketball junkie and basketball historian.
Hmm.
So your book really triggered an interest into me. So from hang time to prime time. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
there it is.
Yes, sir. Hey, thank you so much for sending the copy. It's a smooth read and I've enjoyed it, buddy.
Oh, thanks so much. Yeah, and I appreciate having me on.
So where did the interest start for you with basketball?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's funny. I think like a lot of kids my age who from the late 80s, early 90s, I think my interest in basketball, I think started with Michael Jordan. And, he was sort of a curiosity because I grew up in just outside of New York City, in central New Jersey. And this is well before, we had basketball was everywhere. We had basic cable and the newspaper. So I think it was Michael Jordan piqued my interest. And then it was, thanks to the NBA and NBC, it was an onslaught of basketball for kids. So I think I got into the Knicks that way, and MSG Network was the local sports cable sports network. So I got into the Knicks there, and yeah, so this was around like 1991, 1992 is when I really started to get into basketball. So I was 14, 15, really like the perfect age, I think, to kind of start following the players, follow the storylines. It was the end of Magic and Bird. It was the beginning of Michael Jordan's ascension. So really, it was a very fertile time to be an NBA fan.
See, and I like how you use the word fertile because David Stern, of course, using his marketing strategy
Right.
and his blueprint, taking the game global with assets such as Michael Jordan,
Hmm.
especially after Larry Bird and Magic Johnson kind of took it to a new level to kind of get TV. Get the game on TV where it wasn't, on a delay like in the playoffs before.
Sure.
So for you being in New York and
Hmm.
those Knicks teams, was it kind of the culture of the time? Because you
Hmm.
bring up culture a lot in the book, and I like how you kind of weave culture and basketball and hip hop and business and all those things together. So was that really what really drove you on writing this specific book?
Yeah, I mean, with the Knicks, if I can understand your question, I mean, the Knicks for me, the fan was definitely about the culture because it was Pat Riley in his Armani finest running the show. It was also, I think, whenever a team is very good in New York City, it's the gravitational pull is immense. I mean, I lived through it with the Rangers winning the Stanley Cup in '94, with those great Yankee teams in the late '90s, when they're with the Mets in '86. When New York has a great team, it's very easy to get swept up in that hoopla, and that team also just had really, to use an overused phrase, it was such a cool team. I mean, you had Anthony Mason, Patrick Ewing, Charles Oakley. I see Frank Isola's book behind you. Um, Patrick Ewing, John Starks. It was just a team of scrappy, no nonsense, hard workers, and I think, and that was really appealing to someone like me who was as square as they come. A suburban white kid, growing up, 45 minutes from New York City, and I think the appeal of that team. is very obvious because in the last 2 years, you've had Paul Nepper's book on the Knicks on those '90 Knicks teams came out. Chris Herring wrote a best-selling book on those '90s Knicks teams. So yeah, it was definitely the part of the culture. And yeah, and I was not the only person who swept up in that because as you said, now I mean the NBA was all about attracting kids and attracting kids with the fact that this was not your parents' or grandparents' sport. I mean, the NBA was a team. Well, the NBA was all about youth. I mean, it pushed youth culture. I mean, in 1990, NBC premiered NBA Inside Stuff, which essentially was an infomercial directed toward kids, and it was and so the NBA and NBC they pushed the NBA toward kids very hard, and I was part of it. And it was everything, not only just in how the game was presented on TV, but also marketing. I mean, with breakfast cereals and fast food and toys and cartoons. I mean, it was if you were a kid with a cable package in the late 1980s, early 1990s, it was very easy to get hooked on the NBA. And once you did, there were a lot of places to get your fix, so to speak.
Yeah, and see, and I appreciate you mentioning Frank Isola's book here. Charles Oakley was a guest. We talked about that book, The
Yeah.
Last Enforcer. But you also interviewed hundreds of people for your
Hmm.
book, and
Hmm.
and many of those have been guests on my show. So
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
yeah, you had Pete Babcock, you had Rick Barry, Sidney Moncrief, Charlie Rosen, Joey
Hmm.
Crawford, Terry Cummings,
Yep.
Frank Layden, Pat Williams. So a lot of those guys have been guests on our show that kind of
Hmm.
shared their journeys. And those personalities pulled you in because of their stories and because of their journeys, in the
Yeah.
NBA. What did you find fascinating about some of those characters and personalities that drew you in even more?
Well, you know what it is? The NBA was back in the 1970s, 1980s. It really was a place where you could get in on the ground floor. Now, if I was to apply for an NBA job or were with a team, or if a recent college graduate was to apply for a job with the NBA or with the team, that person would have to jump through hoops. They'd have to compete against thousands of other applicants to get a job. They would have to maybe know somebody. They would have to be the creme de la creme. You could pretty much walk into the NBA's office in New York City and ask for a job and get one. I mean, and the same thing went for folks who started in the NBA or were or start off with teams or reporters like Charlie Rosen. That you could pretty much start on the ground floor and do everything. I mean, if you look at the people who are covering NBA games back in the even in the 1970s, it was not a desirable beat the way that it is now. So if you were in your early 20s and were just out of journalism school, you could cover an NBA team. If you hustled and you wanted to put an extra hours, you could work for the Indiana Pacers or the Cleveland Cavaliers. It wasn't a hard job to get. And I think and you mentioned all those people that were on your show who I talked to all of them. They were easy to approach. They were easy to find. They were willing to talk. And I think that's a large extension because of how they started up. They started well before the NBA was this impenetrable big business that draws in literally billions of dollars a year. It really was a mom and pop organization. And so it was very easy to make connections and to network and to know people. I mean, look, Pat Williams is,
Oh,
in the 10 years I've been writing about basketball, is one of the nicest people I've ever met. And he's somebody who I think any journalist can call him on his cell phone and he'll talk to you for 35, 40 minutes. Frank Layden is another guy like that. But now I don't think you're going to see that. It's the NBA now is very much a big business, and there's so many hoops to get to if you want to ingratiate yourself as a reporter. I think as someone who wants to get into that line of work, it's so much harder. But back then, the barrier to entry was sub level. I mean, you could I mean, I can't tell you how many people I talked to who worked for the NBA who got the job through like a recruitment agency. It was not. It wasn't a job that was sought after.
Yeah. And see, and I'm glad you use those specific examples because,
Hmm.
Frank Layden, I live here in the Salt Lake Valley now,
Hmm.
as we spoke right before we started.
Hmm.
Just an unbelievable, great person. He and his
Yeah.
wife, Barb, and just,
Hmm.
all the things that they did to keep the franchise here, in
Yeah.
Salt Lake City was
Hmm.
phenomenal stories for me. And then, then I think of like someone like Peter Vesey, who was also on the show,
Yeah.
who was kind of a part of that ascension
Yeah.
of the NBA, and just his way of bringing stories to the forefront and getting facts
Hmm.
to everybody as a viewer. I think we're tremendous in building up the brand. um,
Yeah.
when you see it
Definitely.
now
Hmm.
with all the social media and with all the fake news and with all just
Yeah.
the just all the comments that are out there, is it harder to get to the truth now, do you feel?
Yeah, I definitely, well, I'm not going to say the truth, but I will say this. I think access, let's talk about access. Access is so much harder. It back, Harvey Arrington, the great New York Times sports columnist, told a story to me once of when he was on the road with the Knicks in the late 70s. Not only did he travel with the team, not only did he stay at the same hotel as the team, but the press secretary would give him and the other beat writers a list of the players' room numbers. So if Harvey wanted to go see, Bill Cartwright or Marvin Webster, he could go to room 315 or call Klondike 560 and get to Marvin or Michael Ray Richardson or whomever. So yes, it is so much different. There is the PR phalanx to get to players and coaches. As a freelance writer, it is exceedingly difficult. But the other thing too that's changed immensely is the players don't need the media the way they once did. For example, for someone like Peter Vesey, who was a marvelous reporter and as dogged a reporter as you'll ever meet in any genre of any genre or subset of journalism. He had the New York Post, which is a major metropolitan newspaper. He had a column for USA Today. He was on NBC. Now players have social media networks. They are media unto themselves. They are media outlets unto themselves. On top of that, the NBA is a thriving enterprise. The players and the teams don't have to cooperate as willingly as they used to when the NBA back in the 70s and 80s was a struggling enterprise. So there is no need for, let's say, uh, 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 for a head coach or a star player to talk to the local newspaper or to talk to the local network. They can if they want to, and plenty of people do, but the incentive isn't there. When a player like Draymond Green can talk about what's going on his podcast, or Steph Curry can put something on his Instagram feed, or LeBron James, there is the the role of the beat reporter now is so much more different than it was even 20 years ago, and that has everything to do with social media and everything to do with the players and the teams knowing that there really isn't much of an incentive now to talk to a reporter. And but you know what? But I'm always proven wrong by that, because there's tons of great reporting and tons of good work being done every day. But the challenges to do that, I think, are going to increase only as time goes on.
Yeah, good. Well put. Again, we're talking with the author of From Hang Time to Prime Time. This is my man, Pete. You need to go out and get a copy of this because he takes you through a great historical journey of how the brand was built. And when I say brand, the brand, the NBA, and the product.
Hmm.
Um, Pete, where can viewers of the show, get a copy of this book?
I mean, they can get it pretty much anywhere. I mean, Amazon, I think, is out of stock right now, but if you go to any online retailer, you can purchase it. You can also grab the book at pretty much any brick and mortar retailer. Their copy's still plentiful there. If you can please buy from a local independent bookseller, that'd be amazing. If someone does buy the book, I'm happy to send a signed book plate, and so I'll send that out free of charge. So I've been doing that for a while, and I'm still happy to do it. It's been writing this book has been one of the thrills of my life. So I'm trying to enjoy it. So, but yeah, I'm easy to find on Twitter, social media. If anyone wants a signed book plate, I'm happy to send them one.
Yeah, and like I'm saying, I'm not just saying it because you're here on the show with me now, but again, I enjoyed reading it because it triggered a bunch of things. That's like one of those, oh yeah, that's right, or
Yeah,
what? It's one of those aha moments where you're like, oh well, I didn't really see it from that perspective. But again, just a great journey and a great job of
thank you.
chronologically putting in to detail what was going on with the league at that time.
No, I appreciate that. And yeah, and one reason why I wrote this book is because I think people tend to forget where the origins of the NBA before it became this this constant presence in our lives. I mean, it really was a struggling enterprise. It really was a league that was struggling for relevancy, was struggling financially. It was on the cusp of major financial disaster. And as time goes on, I think it's easier and easier to forget where things came from. I mean, and I'm seeing this now. I don't know if you see this as well, seeing how you're so steeped in basketball. But when I was a kid, talked about Michael Jordan earlier. I never thought that people would forget who Michael Jordan was. I never thought that I'd have to explain to somebody or have someone ask, well, what made Michael Jordan so great? Why isn't he better than Kobe or LeBron? And I think, to me, this book, I mean, it's I wanted to write this book in a way to understand how the NBA got from point A to point Z. And
Yeah.
I think this book serves as sort of a time capsule of the way things were. And that's the thing. I mean, there's so many people besides the players that I grew up watching and have read about who made this league into what it is. And it's not just Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and Magic Johnson and David Stern. It's a host of people who did this out of love and out of I think a greater purpose.
Yeah, well said, and I think you did a great job with that. Spencer Haywood has been a guest on this show,
Oh,
and
nice.
again, his hardship rule and how he
Hmm.
took on, uh, you know, basically took on the government,
Yeah.
for a LeBron and for all these players that went right from high school to the
Hmm.
association. So I think of him, and then of course Rick Barry. You
Right.
mentioned in this.
Hmm.
So yeah, there are several cast and characters that help, and I'm glad to see some of these ABA players now getting money for what they did. For the league before it merged. So there's so many things that go into it, and yes, it's grown so much and it is such a global game now, but the way that, as you say, encapsulate it to kind of make a time capsule of the league, just eloquently
Oh,
done.
thank you. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the ABA, because I think that to me is I have no idea why the NBA has been so reluctant to acknowledge the ABA. It's a absolute puzzlement to me. The fact that the NBA took so long to come up with any sort of compensation or any kind of pension
Yeah.
it is boggles the mind. I mean, the NBA made, I believe, $10 billion in profit last year. So I think there can be a little bit saved for the folks who I don't think I'm surprising anybody when I say this. The folks who helped the NBA become the NBA,
Yeah.
because of the style of play and the
Right.
athleticism that they brought to the game. And I think Peter Vesey brought this up, either on social media or one of his columns. So many of these men with the ABA, they passed away,
Yeah.
and they also are at the point now where they really do need medical care. And I don't know how much it is. It's I don't know, I think I want to say 30,000 or something a year. It's a nice sum, but when you look at the age of these men, the fact that many of them are not in the best of health, it strikes me as being a little too late. But look, it's better late than
Yeah.
never. But
Yeah.
but I have no idea why the ABA continues to be sort of the redheaded stepchild for the NBA, including even going to the Hall of Fame and barely seeing a lick of ABA paraphernalia was kind of jarring.
Right,
To be
right.
honest with
Well,
you.
when you think, you're talking, ABA, and then immediately a lot of people will think, okay, Dr. J,
Yeah,
Julius Irving,
sure.
and those Nets, and then of course your
Hmm.
Indiana Pacers were absorbed, your Nuggets, your Spurs.
Yeah,
So, you think of those guys who really, at least brought attention and a style
hmm,
of play to
right,
the NBA, because the NBA had a black eye at the time, because
sure.
a lot of the players were African American. White
Hmm,
America couldn't really grasp them because there was a lot of drugs and there was a lot of
hmm,
fights. And Kermit Washington was just a guest on this
hmm.
show recently, and he has an amazing story
Yeah.
with that. But I just think of the league and where it is now with your John Morants and your Zions and your
Hmm.
Jalen Browns, and yeah, the league's in great hands because there's great athletes there. But yet, gosh, don't forget how the league got to where it is, to where these guys could showcase their talents and have the salaries that they now have
Right.
thanks to TV contracts. And again, you kind of share that journey with the readers.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing with television. I mean that's all David Stern. I mean David Stern was the man who wanted legitimate prime time space. He did not want to be relegated to an afterthought on CBS when the Final Four would come down the pike. He didn't want to be just have games on Sunday afternoons. He wanted prime time television. And the shocking thing about that is that deal is only 33 years old. The NBA signed that deal in 1989. So it's very, I mean, a lot of the things that a lot of the pieces that provided the NBA that allowed the NBA to become what it is now are relatively recent developments. If you look at it, also if you look at the rise in international play, I mean the Dream Team, which I think is sort of the apotheosis of that whole of David Stern's whole international cavalcade to bring the NBA internationally and have international stars come to the U.S. That's 30 years old. All of these little things that, well, not quite so little things, but all these major developments, they're relatively recent. I mean, but again, in today's media environment, 30 years ago might as well be the Bronze Age. It might as well be, before it might as well be, it's prehistoric, because things happen so quickly now, and that and we are bombarded with trade news and signings and developments and clips that it's very easy to forget where the NBA came from and how recent the NBA's dominance is. It's not something that happened, it hasn't. The NBA is not like baseball, where baseball was always sort of just folded into the American way of life, and it was part of the Civil War, and it kind of grew the growth with the growth of the nation. The NBA's the NBA's development really is just a testament to hard work and ingenuity, and a lot of that is David Stern. A lot of that has to do with getting the sport into every nook and cranny, getting it on cable, getting it on international packages, getting it, with NBC and treating it like an entertainment property and not as a way to kill 4 or 5 hours on a Sunday afternoon. So
Yeah.
yeah, it annoys me that people forget about that. The same way that people that basketball fans in their 60s and 70s lose their mind when you forget about Elgin Baylor or Dolph Shays or Bob Pettit. It's there needs to be, I think there needs to be room for history, and I think that's something that I wish the NBA did a little bit of a better job with. I think that tends to get shuffled in the push for new, But
Yeah. Especially for all the, everybody wants a hot take and they
yep,
want clicks right now. So,
yeah.
yeah, a lot of the role players that were out there behind the scenes, those are guys I love to have conversations with because they were still a vital piece to,
Hmm.
with what's going on currently. And I think it's a great point. But people love stories.
Yeah.
Share some of the stories that intrigued you when you're having these conversations with these people who a lot of people idolize. So,
Hmm.
Larry O'Brien and the trophies, and now trophies are being named. But who are some of the guys that stand out to you when putting a project like this together, and you're just like, wow, that's just fascinating to me.
You know what? It's there. I mean, I did 315 interviews for this book, original interviews, and yeah, no, it's funny. I mean, it seems like a lot, but if I had more time, I would have done another 200 if I had the time. But the one thing about this book that was such a joy, and I mean this sincerely, was everyone I talked to, with one or two exceptions, they were eager to they were eager to talk. They were eager to share their memories, because I think for a lot of people that though those years, the book covers 1975 to 1989.
Yeah.
Those were, for a lot of those sources, those were their salad days. Those are the days where they were, where they were trying something new. It was they were part of an exciting time, and it was some of the best years of their lives. I mean, not only just NBA employees, but players and coaches I spoke with. And it was also a time where the game was simpler. It was easier to navigate the league. It was easier to, you know, you knew everyone there. The circles were tighter. So for a lot of people, like, this was their college, this was their high school. And so the interviews were just a joy. And I mean, I'm trying to think of stories that stand out. I mean, there were just so many great stories.
Right.
The one, I mean, I just, little snippets stick out. Like speaking to George Gervin after, while he was, after he finished mowing his lawn, was a trip. You mentioned Larry O'Brien, going to his son's law firm and reading, Larry O'Brien's unpublished memoir
Wow.
about his time at the NBA was just an absolute thrill. And I'm going through, Xerox copies where there are handwritten notes, and I'm, scribbling stuff down on a legal pad, to just hoping not to miss anything. Just hearing people talk about being on the ground floor of something great, and whether that was NBA entertainment, which unleashed all those videos,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and all those highlight packages, or talking to, reporters like Peter Vesey and Jackie McMullen, Bob Ryan, just the fact that these people were there when the NBA was really, in terms of popularity and reach, just an embryo. I mean, that's what stands out in my mind. I mean, and just I mean, what stands out most, I think, is how fortunate I was. Because look, I'm under no illusion that other people could have written this story, and this book could have been written by any journalist who was there at the time. It could have been written by any player, any coach. But the fact that I was able to write this book, and that so many people were so open to talk with me, and they were so happy to hear from me, that is something that, honestly, I'm never going to forget. I mean,
Wow.
this book could sell 3 copies, it could sell 3,000 copies, but the fact that people let me into their lives and were willing to do so, and were willing to let me tell this story, that's what stands out most of all, 2 years after this book was released, for sure.
See, and I like that. And did you find that, was it players that were most eager, or was it the coaches that had the funniest stories, or was it journalists? I mean, talk about those in those three categories.
Yeah,
The players.
the
How are the
play. Yeah,
players?
the players. I mean, look. I'm of the belief that there is nobody who is more pleasant to speak with than a retired athlete. Because a lot of the times, as I said before, they're forgotten. I mean, even someone like Julius Erving or Sidney Moncrief, or Mark Eaton, who I spoke with, RIP. They were all just thrilled to hear from me, and they were all just so generous with their time and their stories. And Sidney Moncrief told me a great story about Larry Bird, um, getting into fights at a college tournament. Like he mentioned, he said that every white player was just like looking to get under the seats, but Larry was out there swinging. The players universally were great. They were just, again, because I think I wasn't asking about, when I talked to Mark Eden, I wasn't talking about like, hey, tell me about the '84 season where you blocked 456 shots, or tell me
Right.
about playing with Karl Malone. I was really curious about like what it was like just being in Utah. What was
Yeah.
it like, being in the NBA before it became this colossus? So yeah, the players were terrific. I will say this: the journalists, to a man slash woman, were open and honest and had wonderful stories. I mean, Dick Stockton hummed
Oh,
the NBA on
wow.
CBS theme song to me, which was a thrill I'll have with me forever. Um, Leslie Visser couldn't have been nicer. She was just it was just, I mean, I grew up watching her on the sports reporters and on ABC, and she was magnificent. The reporters were great, but I tell you what, the people who had the best stories were the folks that you would that I doubt you've heard of, or your listeners or viewers have heard of. These were people that worked in the NBA offices, who worked in marketing, or they worked as administrative assistants, or they worked at NBA entertainment looking at film. These folks had the best stories because no one really had asked them about it. So
Ah.
here I am,
So it's like the first time they got to tell the
yeah,
story.
exactly. Like, again,
Yeah.
and so that's the thing. When I interview anybody for anything, I never want to ask a question that someone's heard 3,000 times before.
Yeah.
So, again, I don't want to talk to City Moncrief about, hey, what was it like when you won Defensive Player of the Year 2 times? Or,
Yeah.
if I'm talking to Rick Welts, who was the until recently the CEO of the Golden State Warriors, who worked in the NBA offices. I'm going to ask him about working with David Stern. What was that like? What did you learn from him? And it was that. And again, I think that's the beauty of this book. I think it's the kind of book I would want to read. Because, as you can see behind me, I have a boatload of sports books, probably an inadvisable number. Um, I wanted to read stories, and I wanted to read anecdotes from that I had not heard before.
Yeah.
And that's that. So writing this book was very much like that. I wanted to go in and have a fresh take on this. Um, and again, I'm still talking to people that I spoke with for this book. Like, I interviewed Del Harris for a New York Times story. And that was based on, we picked up where we left off. I mean, from my dealings with him, he's just a really good guy. And so, yeah, and he had great stories. So it's just, again, I think people always want to talk about their jobs. And I think they're very willing to talk about their jobs after they've been away from them for a while. And this book is really just, I think, and they also want to talk about their jobs when they feel like they've contributed something. So it was,
Yeah.
so this book was really, again, I'm honest. I'll be honest with you, Scott. I don't think there was one bad clunker of a story. I don't think there was one person who, when I hung up the phone, I said to myself, well, that was a waste of time.
Yeah.
It was. So I had a pretty good batting average.
Yeah. And see, I think that's great because you, as a journalist and a fan and someone
Hmm.
who had an interest in this, you
Yeah.
did, from a journalistic lens,
Hmm.
ask the right questions to have them, you know what? Here's something fresh. And so when you're hearing something fresh and you're able to document that and now make it a part of history,
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
you've got something special there. And I think that's something that kind of drew me in and helped keep me turn the pages because things were discussed from an angle that I haven't thought of being a professional basketball coach myself.
Sure, of
So
course. Thank
that's
you.
that's that's what I think makes it nice because it's not like, okay, well, I'm going to read a few pages here. No, it's like you keep turning the page, you get into the next chapter, and you're just like, you know what, it all starts to make even more sense.
Yeah, thank you. No, that was the idea. The idea was, again, to figure out how the NBA became the sport, the league, I should say, that I love and have watched pretty intently for
Yeah.
30 plus years. And I felt I've read many great books about the 70s and 80s, but I hadn't really read a book that I felt answered that question satisfactorily.
Yeah.
And maybe it was in, it's pretty big pretty big bite to take, but I wanted to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
I this might be my only chance to write a book, so I wanted to go with everything I had, and yeah, and I appreciate that. I didn't want to write a textbook. I didn't want to write a book where it's just here's a story and another story. I wanted a reader, even a non-sports fan, to understand how a business was built.
There you
And
go.
and I think that to me is why I think the book, why I'm still talking about this book 2 years after it was released, why I think it's selling, knock on wood, fairly well. I don't look at the sales figure, so I don't know. So
Yeah, yeah. And see, but Pete, I think it's great, and and I think too. I like how you're talking about shoe contracts. I like how you're talking
hmm
about TV
yeah.
deals. I like how you're talking about how the whole thing manifested itself, and
hmm
how the culture changed, and yet how they kind of guided the culture. Because you think
right.
of someone like the Fab Five, and you think of the
hmm
long shorts. Even though Michael Jordan was doing it, all of a
yeah.
sudden here's five guys at the University of Michigan doing it with black
Yeah.
socks, and now with NIL, think of the millions of dollars they could have made. But at that time, it wasn't even in the sight. So, and then you think of Allen Iverson, with the change, and the cornrow hair, and
Yeah.
again, white America trying to grasp on to a young guy who was very competitive, had a great
hmm
skill set, and inch for inch, one of the best to ever do it. And yet
right.
look at how culture and music and hip hop and dress, and fashion codes were changed
Yeah.
because of certain people.
Right.
Were there
Absolutely.
things like that that really stood out to you that you're just like, man, it's transforming right in front of our eyes?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, looking back, to me, Michael Jordan is not only the piece of the puzzle for everything you just mentioned, but he's the puzzle.
Yeah.
There is no Allen Iverson without Michael Jordan. There's no Fab
Amen.
Five without Michael Jordan, because Michael Jordan, and I write about this in the book. You could assign any characteristic you wanted to Michael Jordan. If you were a kid or a teenager, you could he was a sign of rebellion, because he was a guy that was a soloist in a team sport, and he was a superstar. Here's a guy who was wearing shoes that were quote unquote banned by the NBA. I'm using air quotes there. Uh, if you're a basketball fan, you have to marvel at how this guy is playing. You see him as the next in line of the aerial artists, from starting with the likes of Elgin Baylor to Connie Hawkins to Dr. J. If you're just if you're not at all a basketball fan, here's somebody who is just empirically amazing at what they do at their job. You can know nothing about basketball, watch Michael Jordan for 10 minutes, and walk away being impressed, knowing that this guy is special at what he does.
Yeah.
So with all of those things in place, Michael Jordan is that vessel that carries the hip hop, carries the NBA all through current day. Because again, Nike sees this. Nike, of course, also knew he was a firebrand in the best possible way, in a non-offensive way. They tailor their whole marketing campaign around him. They rap and hip hop also becoming mainstream helped immensely, because you could take those things, tamp it down to fit Michael Jordan's personality, and not come out looking controversial.
Yeah.
So I mean, it really was just it was a confluence of so many factors. It was the time. It was the fact that musical tastes were changing, sociologically things were changing. Rap was becoming more mainstream. Um, and you also had Michael Jordan in a position where he was just immensely talented, and he was the perfect person to
A
recruit
marketing tool.
a marketing tool, but also someone to attract a new wave of basketball fans.
Yeah. Kind of like how Whitney Houston, brought R&B to the mainstream.
Yeah,
Michael Jordan, I mean, think about it. Gatorade, I want to be like Mike. And then,
right.
Spike Lee jumping on, it's got to be the shoes.
Yeah.
So again, you look at
Hmm.
the personalities, you look at the
Hmm.
characters, you look
Hmm.
at everything that kind of comes together, and
Yeah,
yet you see it happening, but yet, like you say, 30 years later, you're looking at it going, everything was changing right in front of their
exactly
eyes,
right.
whether they wanted to accept it or not. It was changing, it was growing, and man, it was gas on the fire.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why it always sort of bothers me when, and I know you're big on social media. I am too, probably to my detriment. But there's always somebody opining about, oh, well, was the NBA was so much better back in this era, or music was so much better back in this era. And that has been the refrain of that has been that has been uttered, that those phrases have been uttered forever. If someone Everyone's always going to think that something is better back then than it is now. And the people who complain about Jean Morant are probably the same people who thought Allen Iverson was great, not realizing that he was a radical change from from the previous NBA generation.
Yeah.
So it always kind of irks me to see people kind of bristle at change, because not only is that part of just how society works. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking to you over video. I'd be talking to you on a rotary phone. But
Yeah.
that's also where the NBA thrives. The
Yeah.
NBA is all about change. It's all about the new. It does. There's the NBA's tradition. I think Joe Cohen, who ran MSG Network, told me this. The NBA's tradition is that it has no tradition. So, and that's why it's always, I think, going to have a glut of new fans, because these fans are all going to be able to go in on the ground floor. They're not going to be expected to know, like, oh, well, yeah, it was this. I don't know, with baseball and football, they're steeped in tradition, and you have to know a bit of the history to get into the club, so to speak. Basketball and the NBA is not like that. You can just be a Giannis fan and just watch his games and that's good enough. But yeah, the people who complain about that, like, oh, the NBA today, it's all changing. These are people I'm convinced haven't watched the NBA, because it's the NBA has always been about change. It's
Yeah.
it's never it's never been it hasn't been static for 30 years.
Right.
And that's going to be the MO as long as Adam Silver's in charge, and as long as David Stern's lessons are carried through the line of successors.
Yeah, it's the proverbial passing of the torch,
Yep,
and
exactly.
and I
Exactly.
like how you put it. It's the amoeba that's always evolving, and yet
Right.
the grasping onto that evolution and letting things, you know, manifest themselves the way they would naturally. So it's almost
Exactly.
like it's going to go where it's going to go because of the
Yeah.
personalities.
Yeah, to me when people complain about, and again, I mean, I know that there are fans who love the old school NBA, and that's great. The old school NBA is great. I'm you can like what you like, but I don't know how you watch Ja Morant or Giannis or LeBron, or Zion, and not marvel at what you see just from
Right.
a base level.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I can. LeBron James is a physical marvel. I don't know how I don't know
Well,
how you can
okay,
watch
so
LeBron James. Yeah,
that's a Karl Malone with ball handling skills.
exactly. It's a Karl Malone with agility. It's a Karl Malone who is as fast as a cheetah. I
Yeah.
don't know how you look at those players and not be at awe of what you see.
Yeah.
And
Just
that to me,
greatness.
yeah, that to me is the beauty of pretty much any sport, especially with the NBA, is that there's always a germ of something that will catch my attention. And yeah, I mean, I do miss post play. I miss up and under moves and hook shots. I miss the mid range game. But I can also turn on any NBA game right now and just be in awe of what I see. And it
Yeah.
may not be like from start to finish, but there are going to be glimpses that'll make me want to watch. I mean,
Yeah.
the game is always going to be played on a 94-foot long court. The hoops are always going to be 10 feet high, unless there's some sort of change that I don't know about. The basics are going to stay the same. But again, it's just a matter of, the canvas is always going to stay the same. it's just a matter of, well, what artist do you like? And to me, if you're not if you're not a Giannis guy, I'm there. There's Steph Curry for you. If you're not a Steph Curry guy, there's Zion. There's always someone who I think will capture the imagination, and that's the beauty of sports. Is
Yeah.
there's always a chance to see something great. And I think in the NBA, the chance of seeing something great happens just about nightly,
Yeah. It's
and
true.
that's why I stick around.
Yeah, see, and I love that because I can kind of, as you're sitting there talking, it's triggering thoughts in my head because I got to consult with, Hall of Fame coach Jerry Sloan. Well, think
Oh
of
yes,
Jerry Sloan's toughness and hard nose, and the tail wasn't going to wag the dog, and
right,
you know that old school mentality, which was so refreshing because he came in there, he was who he was. And then I got to be with Keith Smart, an Indiana guy, because I'm from
right,
Indiana.
right.
I'm with him with the Golden State Warriors when Steph Curry was just a rookie. And
Yeah.
I got to be around him, for 3 summers, and then,
Hmm.
seeing how he has transformed the game, even though he just blocked out the cynicism, worked on his skill sets, the quick release. And now, here he is, the all-time leader in 3-point shooting. So look at the transformation just from those two characters that I gave you just in my basketball coaching
Yeah.
career to how it's evolved. So I think that's why maybe too, that's why I enjoy from hang time to prime time, because again, you kind of help encapsulate that journey and see that growth through your eyes, which again, it needs to be documented, it needs to be appreciated, but yet it also needs to be embraced for what it was and what it is and what it's going to be.
No, that's well said. And again, I think you can enjoy the past and also enjoy what's in the future, and
Yeah.
enjoy what you see now. I mean, Steph Curry is a marvel, and I
Oh,
think you know you may not like how the game is evolving into a game of spacing and three
yeah.
point shots, and that's okay. But you can't look at Steph Curry and not say that he's a great ball player. I mean, he's a phenomenal talent, and he is probably the best shooter I've ever seen. But the best part about sports is that I'm saying that now, but in 10 years there might be somebody greater. There might be somebody who can shoot the ball regularly from 40 feet out, and somebody
Yeah.
who is just even better, a better ball handler, and a more tenacious defender.
Right.
The joy to me is to see who's next and what's next.
Yeah. See,
And
I
I
like
and I,
that.
and I think but again, but you can, oh, but you look, I'm a nostalgic person, but you can be nostalgic while also appreciating what you see today. Like
Yeah.
you don't have, I mean, they're not mutually exclusive
Yeah.
acts.
Yeah.
So I think with and that's with everything, with sports, movies, books. There's you can go back and you can go forward, and there's greatness across the spectrum. You just have to know how to look for it.
Yeah. And see, I think a perfect example of this as of right now, think of that just happened within 24 hours. Clyde Drexler, Trailblazers all time leading scorer,
Yeah,
just passed by Damian Lillard,
yeah.
which again, here's a guy who has taken, his hard work and his loyalty, staying with that
Hmm.
franchise and staying in that market, saying, no, I want to build something special here and I want to be the best at it. Well, he's doing that.
Yeah.
And if you can't appreciate that for what it is, man, you've got to get out of your own mind and appreciate greatness when you see it, because before long it's going to be gone, and then it's just going to be, well, remember when.
Well, that's the thing. And then there's all the people that are criticizing Damian Lillard are going to be like, "Oh, he was great. Oh, I miss Dame. Oh, he was wonderful. Oh, I can't believe he didn't win a ring." It's the it's all cyclical.
Yeah.
We're always, we always look. I think with sports especially, we hate now and we love later. So I grew up hating Michael Jordan because I was a Knicks fan, and every spring was basically, he would torture the Knicks, and torture John Starks and Derek Harper, and it was basically like getting hit across the face with a dead cod, every May. But now looking back, now as a 45-year-old and not a 16-year-old or 17-year-old, I can look back and I appreciate Michael Jordan for
Yeah.
what he was, for what he brought to the game, for how good he was. And it's the same thing's going to happen. LeBron's going to retire, and the same people that are complaining about him now, or say that he's too selfish, or he's too outspoken, or he's too this, or he's too that, when he retires, they're going to look back and they're going to realize how great he was,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Great point.
distance cures all.
Yeah, I love that. Ladies and gentlemen, again, we're talking to Pete, and from hang time to prime time, go out, get a copy of this book. It's a wonderful read. I think you guys will enjoy it with your library. I implore you to get out there, support this, because again, it's just a great snippet from 79 or 75 to 89, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just wonderfully done. So again, great job on that. Looking back at it now,
Mm-hmm.
being critical of yourself,
Sure.
is there anything you left out of the book that you wish wasn't left out? Because we got like 4 minutes left here.
Yeah, I mean, oh God, I mean, I would have loved to have gone back even further. Talk more about the ABA, talk more about maybe the Spencer Haywood rule, and Rick Barry switching leagues. But again, it's the issues that I have are more about stylistic things, little facts I got wrong here and there. And that's with any book. You're never gonna seek perfection. But I would have loved to have maybe dealt a little bit more into the NBA's drug issues. Um, but again, when I took a pretty big bite, so there's some stuff that I
Yeah,
had to leave out. But
yeah.
yeah, but looking back, the stuff that I'm critical about is, I should have made that extra phone call, or you know what, I should have called, three more people to expand this anecdote, or this person said something really interesting and I didn't follow up on it. And that's really what being a writer is all about. I mean, I feel like I'm always going to live in a state of constant regret with anything I write, anything I write. And again, I've been doing this since 1998.
Wow.
Writing everything from trade magazine articles to obituaries to advertorials to movie reviews. Every piece I have a problem with. So, so if I were to go into, so the book is just one on a mountain range of regrets and unanswered and unresolved issues that I have. But you know what? As I said before, I didn't think there was a time in my career I didn't think I'd write again. I would write, because I'd gotten really bitter on journalism and bitter on being a writer. There were some times where I thought I wasn't going to be doing this anymore, and to have a book come out and to have my wife and my daughter be there for it, quite honestly, that is, that means more than anything to me. So,
Yeah.
we'll see if I can write book two. I hope so. We'll see, but I don't know if there's anything I missed. I'm sure I did, and I'm sure
Oh yeah.
as soon as I get off the phone with you, I'll be like, oh man, I should have talked more about Michael Ray Richardson, or I should have talked more about the international scene, or the draft. I mean, the '84 draft. I mean, there's a great book written about that by Philip Bondi that that's been done to death. But yeah, I mean, I'm always going to have that yoke around my neck.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, again, this is my man Pete from Hang Time to Prime Time. Go out, get yourself a copy of that book. Pete, has been a pleasure having you on the show. I truly hope that you do find the inspiration to write another one, because I'll tell you what, I'll have to get a copy of that, have to have you on here marketing another one, because I know you're going to push yourself. You're driven, you're detailed oriented, and those are the things that I can sit back and appreciate from my lens. So God bless you, my friend. All the best to you and your family, and thank you so much for sharing your time and insights here with the viewers of the Coach Scott Field Show.
Scott, it was my pleasure. Happy holidays and happy New Year to you.
You bet. God bless, my friend. Hopefully, maybe we'll cross paths sometime here soon in this basketball world here.
Hey, it's a small world, sure.
There
So
you
I'll
go.
be up for that for sure.
Let's do it. All right, ladies and gentlemen, again, this is my man Pete. Get out and get that book from hang time to prime time. Happy holidays to you guys, and what a great way to go into the holiday season with some hang time to prime time, because it's always prime time in the NBA. Appreciate you, Pete. God bless.
Thanks, Scott.